I opened the door of my own house, the house where every brick carried the sweat and effort of my younger days. For years, I had dreamed of living peacefully here in my retirement, surrounded by love, laughter, and respect. Instead, what I got was my daughter-in-law's sharp voice cutting through the air like a blade. "If you don't enjoy staying with us, go," she said, her words dripping with arrogance. My heart sank, for she conveniently ignored the truth. This was not her house. This was mine. They had been living rent-free ever since my son married her. I never asked for a single penny, never demanded a contribution, because I believed in family, in helping them start their life together. I thought patience and kindness would bring gratitude. But slowly, things changed. At first, it was the small things: disrespectful looks, avoiding chores, shutting doors loudly. Then came the larger blows: treating me like a burden, mocking my habits, and acting as though I was an intruder in my very own home. What hurt me most wasn't her words, it was my son's silence. He would stand there, eyes cast down, lips sealed, as though his mother's dignity was not worth defending. That silence was heavier than any insult. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the walls I had painted with my own hands years ago. I thought of my sacrifices: working double shifts, skipping meals, saving every rupee, all to build a future for my son. And now, here I was, being told to leave. But a voice inside me whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of something greater." I knew I couldn't fight them with loud words or bitter arguments. No, my revenge would be quiet, patient, and far more powerful. I decided, in that moment, that I would show them what happens when you bite the hand that built the very roof over your head. The next morning I moved as if nothing had happened. I greeted them with a smile, poured tea, and asked my son about his day. Appearances matter to people like them. Outrage needs an audience. So I became ordinary, predictable, kindly, the image they had grown used to. While inside I braided a different kind of rope. First, I took inventory. I watched how they spent, where they went, what they bragged about when they thought I wasn't listening. I kept receipts of the things they charged to my name, cataloged messages they left on shared accounts, and noted the times the daughter-in-law's subtle contempt turned into open disregard. Small things: a bill left unpaid, a repair ignored, a borrowed sum, for now, that never returned, became pieces of a wider pattern. I opened a new bank account in my name only, moved small sums there from accounts I controlled, and changed passwords nobody in the house knew. I called the solicitor I had used years earlier, and asked a single, quiet question. What protections can I place so my home remains what I built it to be? He listened without surprise. People like me often ask that question too late. I asked it in time. At the same time I practiced a dangerous art: compassion as camouflage. When she complained about food, I cooked her favorite dish. When my son lingered in the doorway, his eyes apologetic, I patted his shoulder and said nothing about his silence. Every tenderness was measured. I wanted them to keep underestimating me, to believe the old woman tired, sentimental, harmless. Because underestimation is a gift for those who plan. I also cultivated small witnesses. A neighbor who liked to chat at the gate, a shopkeeper who remembered the daily payments, a former colleague who still knew my ways. I shared exact, simple facts with them, like a gardener planting seeds. If the day came when I needed corroboration, there would be no convenient amnesia. At night I sat with a neat folder on my lap. Photocopies of bills, pictures of evenings they claimed to be elsewhere, and notes where I recorded the time and tone of every insult. Evidence, I told myself, is a neutral thing. It neither screams nor sobs, it only shows. I learned how to organize it, how to annotate a timeline so that a stranger would look at it and say, plainly, "This is not coincidence." Through all of this I never raised my voice. I never slammed a door. My revenge would not be a tempest that smashed and then vanished. It would be a slow, steady tide that pulled the sand from beneath their feet until nothing familiar remained. Patience became my weapon, strategy my comfort. When I finally closed the folder and turned off the light, I felt less like a wronged woman, and more like an architect of consequence. The first moves were now in place. The rest, the moment when the ruin would be quietly revealed. I moved quietly, the way a watchmaker handles tiny gears. Deliberate, exact, unseen. The map I had drawn in my head began to be etched into small actions that would, in time, feel inevitable to them. First came the conveniences they had taken for granted. I called the bank one afternoon and spoke in a voice steady as a metronome. "Please freeze the old card," I told them. It was compromised. No drama, no accusation. The clerk's questions were routine. The card that the daughter-in-law favored, her little luxury lever, was suddenly a useless rectangle. When she reached for it later and found it declined, she blamed the machine, then the bank, then bad luck. I smiled in the kitchen as she fumed. She could not imagine the hand that pressed the button. Next, I altered the pathways where money once flowed freely. Automatic transfers I had set up years before, small stipends for groceries, a discretionary allowance, were rerouted. New accounts, new names, legal locks placed behind phrases like irrevocable and trust. Paperwork that looked generous to a casual glance now had teeth. If she tried to access what she considered hers, she would find doors bolted and forms explaining why. I tightened the house's edges. Service contracts were reviewed, bills were checked and challenged. When the gardener's payment came late, the lawn browned slightly by the time the daughter-in-law noticed. She complained about the wilted roses, as if the world conspired against her. I nodded with bland sympathy. The small indignities piled an unpaid bill here, a denied request there, each a pebble placed on the slope of their composure. Then I let slip crumbs of doubt into the neighborhood. A casual remark to the grocer about an unpaid invoice, an aside to the building superintendent about forgotten requests. Conversation, when seated carefully, grows into rumor, rumor grows into scrutiny. People began to see the hairline fractures. Late nights with unfamiliar cars in the driveway, purchases that no one could explain. They started to ask questions that touched the edges of what the daughter-in-law had so carefully staged. My son began to notice. Not with accusation. He was not yet ready for that, but with that unsettled look that comes before a man confronts inconvenient facts. He found a receipt in the laundry basket, a hotel charge in the middle of a work week. He frowned, pocketing it like a man who plans to forget but cannot. I watched him handle it, the way one handles a small, sharp object with caution and a dawning unwillingness to be cut twice. All the while, I kept my face unchanged. I poured tea, mended a torn shirt, and prepared the same meals. When the daughter-in-law sneered about my old-fashioned ways, I answered with a warmth that felt like lacquer over wood, smooth and unyielding. Anger is noisy, it gives your enemy a stage. I refused to perform. At night I reviewed the folder, adjusting dates, annotating details. Each entry was a stitch in a pattern that could not be explained away as coincidence. Evidence is patience's most honest language. People who build their lives on convenience forget how fragile convenience can be when the account is cut. A small thing, a missed payment to her favorite subscription, became a chink. She ranted, the household listened, and the son, for the first time, looked from her to me and saw the possibility of a different truth. It was enough. Not the end, but the beginning of unraveling. The rope I had been braiding around their entitlement tightened a fraction, and I could feel their balance tilt. The unraveling began not with thunder, but with whispers. I had always believed truth does not need to shout. It only needs to arrive at the right moment. One Sunday evening, the house was alive with chatter. She had invited a few friends over, parading herself as the perfect hostess. The table was dressed with food bought from money she never earned, laughter spilling as though her life was untouched by deceit. I sat quietly, folding napkins, invisible in my own home. Then came the turn. My son's phone buzzed. He answered, his tone casual at first, then rigid, clipped. A pause. His face hardened like stone. A charge? He asked into the phone, his eyes narrowing. In my name. He left the table, pacing. The room shifted, her friends exchanging uneasy glances. She tried to laugh it off, offering some light excuse, but her voice cracked at the edges. I didn't interfere. I let silence stretch its claws. When he returned, he didn't look at her the same way. Suspicion had broken through the surface. That was all I needed. Later that night, I slid the folder across the dining table, while she busied herself in the kitchen. My son's hands trembled as he opened it. Bank statements, signed authorizations he had never made, photographs of her slipping into hotels with a man who was not him. I had gathered each piece like pearls on a string, polished and undeniable. His breath hitched. This can't be real. It is, I said, my tone steady, almost gentle. I didn't want you to hear it from anyone else. She took from me. But worse, she took from you. He flipped through the pages until his knuckles whitened, the weight of betrayal pressing on him like lead. She returned just then, her smile bright but forced, and froze when she saw what lay open before him. Her voice faltered. This is ridiculous. She's lying. She forged this. But the tremor in her pitch betrayed her. My son didn't shout. He didn't even speak. He simply pushed the folder toward her, his eyes glazed with a mixture of fury and devastation. That was the moment her mask cracked. The cunning, the entitlement, the performance. Each piece fell like glass to the floor. And in its place was silence, raw and heavy. I leaned back, my hands folded in my lap. For the first time, I felt the scales tip. She had played her game so well, but she had forgotten the one truth that guided me: no lie survives when you shine enough light on it. The dinner that had begun with her laughter ended with her silence. And I knew. We had only just stepped into the storm's eye. The silence after her mask cracked was louder than any scream. My son sat there, staring at the folder, as though every page stripped away the life he thought he knew. She tried again, her voice trembling, weaving excuses like a desperate spider mending a broken web. It's not what it looks like. He's just a friend. Those transactions, they're mistakes, misunderstandings. You know me? You know I'd never. But my son didn't lift his eyes. He closed the folder slowly, as though sealing away not just evidence, but a chapter of his heart. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken for me. The days that followed were a storm contained within walls. My son moved through the house like a ghost, answering her words with silence. She pleaded, argued, even threatened, but the weight of betrayal had carved a canyon between them. Her friends stopped visiting. Her laughter faded. She was shrinking, unraveling. One evening, he came to me. His shoulders slumped, his voice rough. "Mother, I should have listened. I let her turn me against you." His eyes shone with a regret deeper than words. "I thought I was protecting her. But all this time, you were protecting me." I placed my hand over his. "You needed to see it yourself. Love can blind, but truth always clears the sight." The very next morning, he confronted her. I didn't watch, but I heard. The shouting, the slamming doors, her frantic protests. Then, finally, the sound of a suitcase dragged across the floor. When the door slammed behind her, the house exhaled. For the first time in years, it felt like mine again. Weeks later, my son returned to me with papers in hand, divorce papers. His voice was steady this time. "I don't want her lies. I don't want her poison. I want peace, and I want my family back." I nodded, pride and sorrow blending in my chest. She had tried to dismantle what I built, but she underestimated me. I was not just a mother to be dismissed, not a bank to be drained, not a fool to be played. I was the root of this family, and roots do not wither when storms pass. They endure. They strengthen, and as I sat by the window once more, watching the sunlight break through after weeks of gray, I smiled. She had thought herself clever, untouchable, but in the end, it was her own deceit that buried her. Revenge was never about shouting or striking back. It was about patience. About letting her own sins consume her. And they did. She walked away with nothing but shame. I remained, with my son, my dignity, and everything she could never steal. The silence in the house after that argument was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My daughter-in-law kept slamming doors, whispering into the phone with her friends, calling me bitter and controlling. But what she didn't know was that I had already taken my steps. silently, carefully, without raising my voice. The lawyer had finished preparing the property documents. The deeds, the savings, the retirement funds. All of it was secured in my name alone. No signature of hers, no access for her. My son, blinded by her sweet words, didn't realize the foundation beneath their feet was already gone. They lived here for free, but they lived only because I allowed it. One evening, I gathered them both in the living room. She smirked, ready to start another fight, but I raised my hand. Calmly, I placed an envelope on the table. Inside, eviction papers. "This is my home. Not yours. You told me to leave, remember?" I said, my voice steady. "Now it's your turn. You have 1 week." Her face drained of color. And for once, she had no clever insults. My son looked from her to me, realizing what his silence had cost him. He stuttered, tried to argue, but when I showed him the bank statements of how much money they had bled from me, his words died in his throat. 7 days later, they left with their bags packed, her pride shattered and his head hung low. The house was quiet again. Not the silence of tension, but the silence of peace. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, breathing freely for the first time in years. She thought she had won when she mocked me, when she told me to go. But in the end, she walked out of my house, not me. Revenge doesn't always come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes it comes with a signature, a document, and the strength to protect what is yours. And that was my victory. Not just over her, but over the weakness she tried to plant inside my family.